By the mid-2000s, Disney Channel was not just a big deal anymore. If you were an executive at Nickelodeon, they were a problem, because a war was going on for the attention of America's children. And Disney Channel actually started winning. On the surface, both networks were roughly about the same. They had cartoons and live-action shows, and both of which were sent to the preteen demographic, but yes, of course there were some teenagers watching, and even kids younger than that. But if you actually saw my first video in this series, you should notice that Disney had a very different direction they went with all of the shows, specifically on their live action, that they put on air. And once they figured out the formula, they basically didn't miss. But once you get to the back half of the 2000s, they continued putting out banger after banger after banger, but they made some changes. And those changes significantly moved the needle on where those shows were going to go, specifically in the plot. Of course, people remember That's So Raven, which started in the first half of the 2000s and rolled all the way into the back half. Like, it was the longest running show Disney Channel had ever put out. I think it did like 100 episodes, at least up until another show on this list, like I'm gonna get to it in a moment, actually dropped. But interestingly enough, That's So Raven was almost the last show of its kind that Disney Channel put out, because once they figured out what the formula was, and specifically which parts they could get rid of at that point, and still get to what their ultimate goal was, they did. So this is part 2 of my breakdown for every live action show that Disney Channel dropped in the 2000s. And yes, there will be a part 3, so some things are gonna have to get left until we get to another time, because we'll be here forever if I try to walk through all of it. And full disclosure, because I am a Christian man who is now married with children, I am going to look at all of this from that framework. Because remember, we are still talking about the cable era. It's not streaming. You can't just turn on whatever you want and binge watch a show. So more or less, kids only had 2 options: Nickelodeon or Disney. And in the first half of the 2000s, that difference was pretty big. But as Disney definitely pulled ahead of Nick during the battle between the 2 networks, the difference between the shows, like if you actually look at the details, started to become nowhere near as big. Starting this off in 2005, Disney Channel dropped The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. And yes, it was a banger. But at first glance, you might think we've never seen a show quite like this. And that ain't true. Because even though Sister Sister is not a Disney Channel show, it did air on the network in the early 2000s, where you have 2 twins who are walking through the world and have all the hijinks and everything that kind of goes along with it. So you just put a little twist on it, because that has its own twist. And you take the 2 twins, you put them in a hotel where they're living in this suite with their mother, and let's just see where the chips fall. Cody is more on the nerdy side, and Zack is more rebellious. But at the end of the day, the twins are a package deal throughout the entire show. They have a whole bunch of friends, but the friends, like their actual peers, don't matter as much, because we spend most of our time focused on London Tipton, who is the daughter of the man who owns the entire hotel, and then you have Maddie, who is the candy girl, but eventually developed a friendship with London anyway, like she just works at the candy shop inside of the hotel. Then you have Mr. Mosby, who's supposed to run the whole thing. So he's almost like the dad figure, considering the mother in the show is a single mother. She is divorced. We do see the father coming in and out of the show. Not much, but we know that he's there. And a little bit of a struggle for his sons as they kind of, mourn not having their dad around on a regular basis. He's kind of like the fun dad, and mom is always the disciplinarian. And that right there is worthy of note, because up until this point in the 2000s, Disney Channel has basically always given us a 2-parent home. And we saw both parents on screen, and they were parenting in some format. Now, you can argue about how good these parents might have been, but unless you're going all the way back to the famous Jet Jackson, where you did have divorced parents, you did, but the father was the parent in the center. We did see a great-grandmother who was like standing in for the mother, and his biological mother was in and out of the plot. Like, we saw the character spending time with both parents. Here, the dad is basically entirely off screen, and as a result, Zack and Cody really only have their mother to answer to. And because she's busy a lot, they can get into a whole bunch of stuff now. And it doesn't even just stop with them. If you think critically, you really don't see parents anywhere reflected in the show at this point. London, her father's not there. Like, we never see his face on camera. Like, there's a moment in the course of the plot where he shows up with all of his bodyguards and things like that. But the joke is that we never actually see him because she never actually is around him. And we don't really know what happened to her mother. As for Maddie, she has 2 parents, like, for the purpose of the plot, but we never see them either. I think they historically, like, if you look at the show, they actually show her mother's arm. I kid you not, they say the arm. and her father is mentioned but never actually shown on camera either. That's it. Parents are basically ghosts in this show, which is a brand new thing for Disney Channel. Remember, 2004, they just gave us Phil of the Future. And even though his parents might be eccentric, they're on camera. So The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody ran for 87 episodes. And yes, the show is incredibly funny. The plot goes all over the place. You do have some episodes where you might see cross-dressing, which is not something we saw a lot of on Disney Channel, but it actually shows up even in season 1, I believe, with the episode called The Fairest of Them All, where it is pursuing a girl who is actually Victoria Justice, which you might notice from Zoe 101, Victorious, and she even did a movie with Zack and Cody that apparently nobody really watched, but yeah, it happened. The movie was so bad they even changed the title of it 3 times and tried to remarket it. Hey, if you didn't know, now you know. But as successful as Zack and Cody actually was, their show did represent, to some degree, a reversal of the direction the channel was going, specifically with how it handled its main characters and the families surrounding them. But if you're new here, I want to say thank you for even making it this far into the video. I'm Ezra Garnett, and I am just a man who has realized that if the Word of God is actually true, then I've got a whole lot of repenting to do. And if anything that I say actually connects with you, it is always greatly appreciated if you would please like and subscribe. But if I don't, just let me know in the comment section, because I do try to read them all, which does make the next show on this list at least come across making a bit more sense now, because Life with Derek did also drop in 2005, and it's technically not a Disney Channel show. It's a Canadian show that they pulled over the footage and decided to air it as a Disney Channel program. But Life with Derek is about Casey and Derek, because now you have a blended family. So you have boys and girls living in a family with, the father and mother who, both came into the situation with children. But the key is, Casey and Derek are high school students. So you have the stepbrother-stepsister relationship where Casey is really the main character, but everything's like in opposition to Derek. If you've ever actually watched the show, which it's not hard to find it online, all the episodes for free, Life of Derek is actually pretty good. It's decently funny, but it's pretty realistic, like relatively down to earth. So the plots don't get all the way off the deep end like you might see in other Disney Channel shows, which is why it didn't really fit in all that much if you watch Disney Channel shows. Even the camera work was different, but if you reverse engineer it, aside from the fact that Casey is a girl, Casey is still more on the nerdy side, Derek is the wild child, doesn't it sound like what we just watched with Zack and Cody? And it did air on Disney Channel for a while. I kind of look at Life with Derek as a filler show. Like they just needed more content to put out there, and the network figured it was cheaper to just buy access to this show to try to go make their own thing. And I guess it worked, because it's the only, non-Disney Channel original show that I'm going to mention going forward on this list. I mean, I could talk about Naturally Sadie and a few others that they tried, but they tried it. There ain't no point in really mentioning it, so we're just going to drop it. Sorry, I'm not sorry. And although it is a two-parent home reflected, where we see them both on screen, it is still a blended family, which is a non-regular or non-traditional family format. And Disney seemed like they wanted to stay on that path from this point on in the back half of the 2000s. Because in 2006, the banger that everybody remembers and can probably never forget if you actually lived through it is Hannah Montana. 98 episodes that all started in 2006. Because Miley Cyrus and her biological father, Billy Ray Cyrus, walked onto the show and stole the hearts of many. Because Miley was a regular girl who's living a double life as Hannah Montana, who is this, pop superstar, and she wants to live like a normal kid and go to school and have her friends, and they don't even really know at first who she is in the truer sense. But her friends Lily and Oliver, they find out pretty quickly, oh snap, Miley is the actual Hannah Montana. And the rest of the plot is just the double life. Like her trying to be the superstar and the different things that happen in school. Because essentially, people love Hannah Montana, but they don't really love Miley the same way. She does have a brother named Jackson, but I already mentioned her father and not her mother, because for the purposes of plot, Miley's mother passed away, 3 years before the events of the show actually take place. I mean, as far as I research it, that's what I understand. But the relationship between Miley and her father does remind me to some degree of the relationship we get between Jet Jackson and his father. Again, like another single-parent relationship. I think part of the chemistry on screen is that that's her actual dad. Like, he ain't just an actor. So there's a lot that you can lean into, but it's still giving us a single-parent home. As far as I know, we don't see much of anything when it comes to Lily's parents or Oliver's parents. they're more or less entirely off-screen for the duration of the show, which isn't uncommon for Disney Channel shows even in the first half of the 2000s. You really just focus on the main character. And the most wild thing about Hannah Montana to me is that Hannah Montana did actual concerts. Like, people went in real life to watch a Hannah Montana concert with Miley Cyrus singing as Hannah Montana. Once again, when I look back on it, it's hard for me to believe that actually happened, but it did. And another fun fact that goes even beyond that is that Miley Cyrus apparently wasn't even Disney's hands-down first choice to play Hannah Montana, because from the outside, it felt like she was always meant to do that role. But Ally Mashaka, like the same Ally Mashaka who we saw in Phil of the Future and, started singing with her sister and did Cowbells, the Disney Channel original movie, that Ally Mashaka, she was offered the role of Hannah Montana and turned it down. How would the world be different? For that matter, how would the show have been different if Ally Mashaka played Hannah Montana? Because I think you would have had to recast everybody around her. You couldn't just keep the same actors and drop her in. And we definitely wouldn't have seen, Billy Ray Cyrus as the father. Like, the whole show would have been different, and I don't think it would have been as effective. So Disney got that one right. Miley Cyrus was the choice. And she didn't just give them a successful show. It gave them a hit that will forever go down in pop culture history. Because Disney had been trying to make singing stars out of their actors for a while. And Miley Cyrus did become a singing star under her own name. But Hannah Montana, that was their creation. And they built it from the ground up, and it worked. And I also have to point out that the secret identity piece, combined with the single parent, still is stolen from Jet Jackson. Because his secret identity wasn't as much of a secret, but he was an actor who had a show that he was on called Silverstone, was trying to do the double life of being the actor and playing this star and people seeing him as Silverstone, but also trying to be Jet Jackson and live his normal life with his friends in his small town. So Miley's trying to keep that same energy. It's just that now the whole Hannah Montana thing, she tries to keep it a secret to further split the two. I mean, a secret aside from her close friends. But after all that, Hannah Montana technically never broke the record that That's So Raven set on the most episodes. But the show that came after it, Wizards of Waverly Place, actually did. Because they did 106 episodes, and it all started in 2007. It's about a family with 3 children, Justin, Alex, and Max. They have their 2 parents, and they live in Greenwich Village, New York. The only reason that matters to me is because I was born and raised in Manhattan. But at the end of the day, they are, as the name suggests, they're a family of wizards. Now, apparently, only one child who's born into this wizard family can inherit the family wizard power that things go. So that's one of the things that's kind of baked into the plot that they're kind of working through. But yeah, they're living their normal lives and going to school and dealing with the things that, preteens and teenagers might deal with, while also being wizards. Now, full disclosure, this is a show that I didn't really watch that much. And there's a reason. Because coming from a Christian context, when you get to sorcery and wizardry, it's one thing to already reflect that in a plot, but it's another when you make that something that is good. Because the powers that would go along with that, if you're understanding a Christian framework, wouldn't come from God. So it's actually pretty controversial when you take magic, sorcery, or whatever, and you put it in the seat of someone who is a good character. Hey, do with that what you will. Disney did make that show, and it was wildly successful. So clearly the American public was fine with it in the general sense. It was entertaining. It drew people in. But it's still controversial. And the fact that they pushed the envelope to make that show at this time, a show that I don't think they would have made 5 years ago, that is worthy of consideration. And I think Wizards of Waverly Place really stands out beyond just the show itself, but because it gave us Selena Gomez. No shade to the other actors, but Selena Gomez is, she took right off from there, doing other Disney Channel movies and then breaking out from Disney Channel and, also being another singer. Disney was always trying to make a hit. Figure out who is the star among stars. And Selena Gomez was the star among stars. The same way you got Miley Cyrus, you got Selena. So the irony of Wizards of Waverly Place is that you did get a 2-parent home reflected, because the last few shows they gave us didn't give you traditional families. Maybe you had single parents, blended families, whatever. But you also have this witchcraft sorcery component that's baked into the show. This is not the first time Disney had done specifically in movies like that. But to anchor an entire show on that particular gimmick was a very strong decision, and it worked. Because Nickelodeon was dropping Danny Phantom and the Fairly Odd Parents and things like that, But this was a live action show where they took some of that same energy and made it work. But in that same year, 2007, Disney Channel also tried it with Cory in the House. Now, this is technically a spinoff from That's So Raven, but it definitely ain't the same show. And it only ran for 34 episodes. So if you know anything about Disney Channel and their 65 episode run, which obviously they started pushing past, like if you don't make it to 65, this is a failure. And the plan for Cory in the House was for it to last for 3 seasons. So why did it fail? Well, first, you have the show itself, then you have a bunch of things surrounding it. So let's just deal with the show. Because Raven's gone, and Raven's mother is gone. Both of them are just kind of wrote out of the plot. I think Raven, you can kind of send her off to college and leave that alone. But for her mother, or in this case, Cory's mother, they just came up with the excuse that she's in law school or something, that she's in England. Now you got Cory and his dad, who is a professional chef, who gets hired by the White House to work for the president. So Cory is living in the White House, and it's how the show gets its name. And then he makes friends amongst like the other, kids who are, children of, diplomats and dignitaries or what have you. And the plots just kind of run around from there. I mean, the president has a daughter who's friends with Cory, and apparently they're like, seeing each other on a regular basis, which is a little bit awkward, but it's a TV show. I think the plot structure in general, like just what they were aiming for, is a little far-fetched. And I'm not entirely sure that kids really cared that much about the presidential components. I mean, it was nice, I guess. At the end of the day, we're watching a single-parent home situation now, and it's going to be hard to sell that when we know what That's So Raven was as a show. Like, we know. Like, it's very successful. And trying to rebrand it as something else. Because remember, you can put Cory in the center, and he might have had some centerpiece episodes. I just don't know how big his fan base was to really drive that show. But we'll also never know how successful it could have been, because some of the episode run was shut down because of the writer's strike that happened in 2008. I mean, there was also a lawsuit where, Kyle Massey apparently got hurt on set. So that's a whole nother thing you can look into if you're interested. Like, apparently while I was shooting season 1, but the show fell apart in the context of, like, actually getting it to the world. And when the strike was over, they just kind of dropped it because Disney had better things to get to. And spoiler alert, once Disney realized what actually does work, things like Zack and Cody, probably shouldn't have to tell you that when I get to part 3, Zack and Cody come back. And they come back real fast. And they stay for a long run of episodes. They just don't put them in the hotel. But the truth without Photoshop about Disney Channel's run in the 2000s, that yes, they did all those cartoons, but the live action shows are what really made the network. And generally speaking, yes, every once in a while, they had a fail. But for the most part, every show was a banger. The first half of the 2000s, they were gaining trust with the community. That's just how I see it. While Nickelodeon was already jumping off the deep end and basically creating plot structures and, character worlds that were pretty far out there, Disney tried to keep it close enough to the vest. And because they were, for lack of a better term, the safer television option, I think that's what allowed them to be comedy and entertaining, but still keep, parents feeling like, oh, this network is, good for my kids. And it worked. A lot of people watched it. By the time you get to That's So Raven, where they're pushing the envelope with the whole psychic thing and, they get to fill it a future and they're trying more and more, I guess you want to call them gimmicks, like, the time travel thing, they rolled with it. And every show from that point on generally had something unique or special about it. Life with Derek was the most normal show that they gave us, and it ain't even their show. Zack and Cody, Hannah Montana, Wizards of Waverly Place, these shows, they were bangers by all estimations. But they're also not just traditional shows. It's not just a kid who goes to school, has some friends, and figured it out. That's what Lizzie McGuire was. She was just a normal girl, moderately cute, with some friends, going out there to, experience the world. But this ain't that. They cranked it up a notch, and it worked. People paid attention from start to finish, sometimes for over 100 episodes. And whether or not any Nickelodeon executives want to admit it, by the time you hit 2007 to 2008, the game was over. Disney Channel had won. They had now dethroned them as the leaders in children's television. The only question from this point on is, what are they going to do now that they are sitting on the throne? But that's what part 3 is for. If you actually made it all the way to the end of this video, I do have to admit that thank you doesn't do it justice anymore, because you are a real one. And I'm always here to have the real conversations, no matter how hard those conversations actually are to have. And if you want more from me beyond this video, it does mean a tremendous amount if you would please like and subscribe.